In the beginning, there was only the vast expanse of space, dark and silent. The primordial waters stretched endlessly in all directions, undisturbed by time or motion. This was the realm before creation, before the gods themselves had taken form, before the first breath of life had stirred the cosmic stillness. From these ancient waters emerged the first beings, entities of such power and majesty that they would shape the very foundations of existence. Among them was Enki, whose name would become synonymous with wisdom, creation, and the mysteries of life itself. His story, passed down through countless generations, speaks to us across millennia, whispering secrets of our origins and our place in the cosmos. The tablets tell us that Enki was born of Namu, the primordial mother, she who existed before all things. In the formless void, consciousness stirred, and from that stirring came the first divine beings. Enki emerged as a god of unparalleled intelligence, his mind encompassing the patterns of creation, the flow of waters, the essence of life itself. Picture, if you will, the young god Enki, gazing out across the infinite waters. His eyes held the reflection of stars yet to be born, galaxies yet to spiral into existence. Within him stirred the impulse to create, to bring order from chaos, to fill the emptiness with wonder and beauty. This was not mere ambition, but the fundamental nature of his being, as essential to him as breathing is to mortals. The cosmic waters responded to Enki's presence, swirling and eddying around him, as if recognizing in him a kindred spirit. Water would become his domain, his element, the medium through which he would work his greatest miracles. The Abzu, the deep freshwater ocean beneath the earth, would become his dwelling place, his sanctuary, his temple. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let us return to those earliest moments, when the universe was young and the gods were still discovering their powers and purposes. There was a time of great council among the divine beings, when they gathered to determine the shape of creation. The elder gods debated endlessly about the nature of existence, about the principles that should govern the cosmos. Enki listened carefully to these debates, his keen mind absorbing every argument, every perspective. He understood that creation was not a simple matter of willing things into existence, but required careful planning, precise execution, and above all, wisdom. The universe would need laws, patterns, structures that would allow it to sustain itself and evolve. As the councils continued, Enki began to formulate his vision. He saw not just a static creation, but a dynamic, living cosmos, filled with endless variety and possibility. He envisioned worlds spinning through space, waters flowing across landscapes, life emerging and evolving in countless forms. His vision was so vast, so comprehensive, that even the other gods marvelled at its scope. The time came for action. The gods had debated long enough. Now they must create, must bring their visions into reality. Enki stepped forward, his hands reaching out to shape the primordial substance of existence. His touch was gentle yet firm, coaxing matter into form, energy into structure, chaos into order. First, he established the foundations of the earth. He dived deep into the cosmic waters, swimming down to where the pressures were immense, where the darkness was absolute. There, in those depths, he laid the cornerstone of the world, a foundation so solid and true that it would support all that was to come. The earth itself would rest upon this foundation, stable and secure for all eternity. Then Enki turned his attention to the waters themselves. He separated the fresh from the salt, establishing the boundaries between ocean and river, between rain and groundwater. The Abzu, his beloved deep, became a reservoir of life-giving fresh water, the source from which all rivers would flow, all springs would bubble forth, all life would draw sustenance. The organization of the waters was no simple task. Each stream needed its course, each river its bed, each spring its source. Enki worked tirelessly, his divine consciousness extending across the emerging world, guiding water to where it was needed most. He created the great rivers, those mighty arteries that would carry life across the land. He fashioned the hidden aquifers, vast underground reservoirs that would sustain life even in the driest regions. As he worked, Enki sang. His voice echoed across the waters, a deep melodious sound that resonated with the very fabric of creation. The songs he sang were incantations of power, words of binding and loosing, verses that encoded the fundamental laws of nature. These were not mere melodies, but the cosmic algorithms that would govern how water flowed, how life grew, how the world functioned. The other gods watched in amazement as Enki's creation took shape. They saw the genius in his design, the elegance of his solutions, the beauty of his vision made manifest. Where they had imagined simple structures, Enki had created complex systems. Where they had planned static forms, Enki had engineered dynamic processes. His creation was alive in a way that transcended mere existence. But Enki knew that water and earth alone were not enough. The world needed life, needed the spark of consciousness, needed beings that could appreciate the beauty of creation and add their own contributions to its ongoing evolution. And so, he began to plan the greatest of his works, the creation of living beings. The process of creating life required the most delicate touch, the most profound wisdom. Enki understood that life was not simply matter animated, but a complex interplay of physical form and spiritual essence. Each living being would need a body suited to its environment and purpose, but also a soul, a consciousness that could grow and learn and experience the world. He started with the simplest forms, the microscopic organisms that would form the foundation of all future life. These tiny beings were marvels of efficiency, each one a perfectly designed system for extracting energy from the environment and reproducing itself. Enki released them into the waters, and they multiplied, filling the oceans and rivers with invisible abundance. From these simple beginnings, more complex forms emerged. Enki guided the process, encouraging evolution in directions that would lead to ever greater diversity and sophistication. Fish appeared in the waters, their scales glinting in the filtered sunlight, their bodies perfectly adapted for aquatic life. Plants took root along the shores, their green leaves reaching toward the sky, their roots drinking deep from the earth. The world was coming alive, pulsing with energy and vitality. But Enki was not yet satisfied. He had a vision of a being that could walk upright, that could think and reason, that could understand the mysteries of creation and perhaps even contribute to them. He envisioned humanity. The creation of humans would be Enki's masterwork, the culmination of all his wisdom and skill, but it would also be his greatest controversy, for not all the gods agreed that such beings should exist. Some feared that humans would upset the cosmic order, that they would prove too intelligent, too ambitious, too dangerous. These concerns would prove both unfounded and prescient in ways none could anticipate. Enki retreated to his temple in the Abzu, descending into the cool, quiet depths where he could work undisturbed. There, in his sacred workspace, he began to design humanity. He studied the forms of other creatures, taking inspiration from their various adaptations. The upright posture of certain animals, the dexterous hands, the large brain capable of complex thought, all these features he incorporated into his design. But the physical form was only the beginning. Enki needed to create a consciousness that could truly think, that could use language, that could pass knowledge from generation to generation. This required something unprecedented in creation, the gift of divine wisdom, a spark of the gods themselves planted within mortal form. The crafting took time, measured not in days but in ages. Enki worked with clay from the Abzu, mixing it with his own divine essence. He shaped the form carefully, ensuring every detail was perfect, every system properly balanced. The being he created was beautiful and terrible, weak and powerful, limited and boundless. It contained within itself the potential for both greatness and folly. When the first human drew breath, Enki felt a surge of pride and hope. Here was a being that could learn, that could grow, that could create its own destiny while still honouring the gods who had made them. He named his creation Adamu, meaning one made of earth, acknowledging both the humble origins and the divine potential of humanity. But one human was not enough. Enki created a companion, a female who would balance and complement the first creation. Together, these first humans would be the ancestors of all humanity, the founders of civilizations yet to come. Enki looked upon them with the love of a father, knowing that their journey would be filled with both triumph and tragedy. The other gods were amazed when Enki presented his creation. Never before had such beings existed, creatures that bridged the gap between the divine and the earthly, between immortality and mortality. Some of the gods immediately saw the value of humanity. recognizing them as potential helpers, workers who could tend the earth and serve the divine purposes. Others remained skeptical, worried about the chaos these unpredictable beings might cause. Enki paid little attention to the doubters. He was too excited about his creation, too eager to see what humanity would become. He established himself as humanity's patron and protector, the god who would teach them the arts of civilization, who would guide them through their early struggles, who would defend them when other gods sought to harm them. And so began the great story of humanity under Enki's guidance. He taught the first humans how to cultivate crops, how to build shelters, how to make tools. These were not mere practical skills, but sacred arts, divine knowledge passed from god to mortal. Each lesson was given with care, with wisdom, with an understanding of how each piece of knowledge would impact the development of human civilization. Agriculture was perhaps the most transformative gift. Enki showed humans how to select seeds, how to till the soil, how to irrigate their fields using the precious water he controlled. He revealed the secrets of the seasons, teaching them when to plant and when to harvest. With agriculture, humans could settle in one place, could build communities, could develop culture and learning. The city of Eridu was the first great human settlement, built at the edge of the marshes where fresh water flowed abundantly from the Abzu. Enki made this city his special charge, dwelling in a temple there so he could be close to his beloved humans. The people of Eridu honoured him with songs and offerings, recognizing him as their founder and protector. From Eridu, civilization spread. Other cities arose along the rivers, each with its own character, its own patron deity, its own contributions to human culture. But Eridu remained special, the first city, the place where humanity had first learned to live in harmony with the gifts of the gods. Enki continued to teach, revealing more and more secrets as humanity proved ready to receive them. He taught the art of writing, that miraculous invention that would allow knowledge to be preserved across generations. The first scribes learned their craft under divine inspiration, their reed styluses pressing cuneiform signs into soft clay, creating permanent records of human thought and achievement. Mathematics came next, the language of quantity and pattern. Enki showed humans how to count, how to measure, how to calculate. These skills would prove essential for building cities, for conducting trade, for understanding the movements of the heavens. Mathematics was the skeleton key that would unlock countless other doors of knowledge. But not all of Enki's gifts were purely practical. He also taught humanity about beauty, about art, about the higher aspirations of the soul. Music flowed from his teachings, filling human celebrations with joy and human mourning with catharsis. Poetry emerged, giving voice to human emotions and experiences. Visual arts allowed humans to capture and communicate their visions of the world. The progress of humanity delighted Enki, but it also created tensions among the gods. His brother Enlil, the king of the gods, grew increasingly concerned about human population and power. Enlil saw humans as noisy, disruptive, potentially dangerous. He began to plot ways to limit or even eliminate humanity, to return the world to its previous quiet. Enki found himself in an impossible position. He loved humanity, saw them as his children, his greatest creation. But he also owed allegiance to the divine council, to the hierarchy of heaven. When Enlil proposed sending a great flood to destroy humanity, Enki could not oppose him openly. Instead, he would have to work in secret, using his cunning to save his beloved creation. The plan for the flood was laid with terrible thoroughness. Enlil would open the heavens and the depths simultaneously, unleashing such a deluge that nothing could survive. The waters would cover even the highest mountains, erasing all trace of human civilization from the face of the earth. The other gods, weary of human noise and presumption, agreed to the plan. Only Enki dissented, but his voice was overruled. Knowing he could not stop the flood, Enki resolved to save at least some of humanity. He chose a righteous man named Ziusudra, a king who had always honoured the gods and treated his people with justice and compassion. To this man, Enki would reveal the coming disaster, giving him a chance to survive and preserve the seed of humanity. But Enki had sworn an oath not to reveal the god's plan to any human. How could he warn Ziusudra without breaking his sacred word? Here, Enki's legendary cleverness came into play. He went to the reed wall of Ziusudra's house and spoke to the wall itself, describing in detail the coming flood and the need to build a great boat. Ziusudra, sleeping on the other side of the wall, heard every word. Enki had not spoken to a human, only to a wall. Technically, his oath remained unbroken. Ziusudra understood the warning. He immediately began construction of the ark, following the specifications that Enki had accidentally mentioned while talking to the wall. The boat was to be enormous, large enough to hold not just Ziusudra's family, but also breeding pairs of every animal, samples of every seed, examples of every craft and art that humanity had developed. The construction took years. Ziusudra's neighbours thought him mad, building a giant boat far from any ocean. They mocked him, questioned his sanity, warned him that he was wasting his resources. But Ziusudra persisted, trusting in the wisdom of Enki even though he could not explain to others why he knew what he knew. Finally, the ark was complete. Ziusudra gathered his family, collected the animals, stored the seeds and supplies, and just in time, for the skies began to darken with unnatural speed. Storm clouds gathered from every direction, swirling into a massive vortex that blotted out the sun. The temperature dropped, and an eerie silence fell over the land. Then the flood began. Rain fell with such force that it seemed to pierce the earth. The fountains of the deep burst open, sending geysers of water shooting into the sky. Rivers overflowed their banks. Oceans surged beyond their shores. The very fabric of the world seemed to dissolve in water. The deluge was so complete, so overwhelming, that within days the highest peaks were covered. Enki watched from his temple in the Abzu, his heart heavy with sorrow. He heard the cries of humanity as they drowned, saw the civilizations he had nurtured disappear beneath the waves. Cities that had taken generations to build were erased in moments. Fields that had fed thousands turned to muddy lakes. The beautiful, intricate world he had created was being unmade, but the ark floated safely, riding high on the floodwaters. Inside, Ziusudra and his family tended the animals, rationed the supplies, and prayed for deliverance. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The rain continued without ceasing, and the waters rose until there was no land to be seen, only an endless grey ocean beneath a weeping sky. The other gods, watching from their celestial realm, began to feel remorse. Enlil had gotten his wish. Humanity was destroyed. The earth was silent. But the silence was deafening. Without humans to make offerings, to sing hymns, to celebrate the festivals, the gods felt strangely empty. They had not realized how much they had come to depend on human worship, how much meaning it gave to their divine existence. Even Enlil began to question his decision. He had acted in anger, in frustration with human imperfection. But destroying them completely had been an overreaction. The world without humans was a cold, dead place, lacking the spark of consciousness that made creation meaningful. The gods had nothing to do, no purpose, no connection to the world they had made. Finally, after 40 days and 40 nights, the rain stopped. The clouds parted, and the sun shone once again on the endless waters. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, the waters began to recede. The flood had reached its peak and was now retreating, draining back into the oceans, seeping into the earth, evaporating into the atmosphere. The ark came to rest on a mountain top, the first land, to emerge from the receding flood. Ziusudra opened the windows and looked out on a transformed world. Everything was covered in mud and debris. The great cities were gone, the cultivated fields destroyed, the intricate networks of civilization erased. It was as if humanity had never existed, as if the world had been returned to its primordial state. But Ziusudra was alive, his family was alive, the animals and seeds were safe. From this remnant, humanity could be reborn. It would take time, generations of effort, but the species would survive. Enki's gambit had succeeded. When Enlil discovered that humans had survived, he was furious. He stormed into the Divine Council, demanding to know who had betrayed the plan. How had humans learned of the flood? Who had given them the knowledge to build an ark? The other gods trembled before his rage, but Enki stepped forward calmly. Enki spoke with such eloquence, such wisdom, that even Enlil's anger began to cool. He argued that destroying humanity completely had been unjust, that they deserved a chance to learn and grow. He pointed out how empty the world had become without them, how the gods themselves had felt the loss. He proposed a compromise. Humanity would be allowed to continue, but they would be made mortal, subject to death, so their numbers would naturally be limited. The Divine Council debated long into the night. Finally, moved by Enki's arguments and their own sense of loss, they agreed to the compromise. Humanity would continue, but they would be mortal, their lives limited to a few decades rather than the centuries they had previously enjoyed. They would have to work hard for their survival, facing challenges and obstacles that would test their ingenuity and resilience. Enki descended to the mountaintop where Ziusudra waited. He blessed the survivor and his family, promising that humanity would have another chance. He also made Ziusudra and his wife immortal, granting them eternal life as a reward for their faithfulness. They would not need this gift on Earth, however. Enki placed them in a paradise beyond the world, where they would live in peace and plenty forever. The repopulation of the Earth began slowly. Ziusudra's descendants spread out from the mountain, seeking fertile ground where they could plant crops and build new homes. They carried with them the knowledge that had been preserved in the Ark, the skills and arts of their ancestors. But they also carried the memory of the flood, the knowledge that the gods could be both generous and wrathful, that human existence was always precarious. Enki worked tirelessly to help the new humanity establish itself. He guided them to the best locations for their cities, showed them how to rebuild their agriculture, reminded them of the crafts and technologies they had lost. Under his guidance, civilization began to flourish once again, though it would never quite recapture the innocence of the pre-flood era. The new cities were different from the old. They were built with an awareness of human vulnerability, with fortifications and protections, with careful planning for disaster. The people were more cautious, more respectful of divine power, more aware of their place in the cosmic order. They held regular festivals honouring the gods, made generous offerings, told and retold the story of the flood so that future generations would never forget. Eridu was rebuilt, and once again Enki made his temple there. But the new Eridu was a different city, marked by the knowledge of mortality and disaster. Its people were wise with a hard-won wisdom, tempered by suffering but not broken by it. They understood that life was precious precisely because it was fragile, that civilization was a gift that required constant nurturing and protection. Enki's relationship with humanity deepened after the flood. He saw them now not just as his creation, but as his partners in the ongoing work of civilization. They had proven their resilience, their worth, their right to exist. Yes, they were imperfect, prone to error and excess, but they were also capable of remarkable achievements, of great beauty, of profound wisdom. The god of wisdom began to share even deeper secrets with humanity. He taught them the art of healing, revealing which plants could cure disease, which treatments could mend injuries. Medicine became a sacred profession, healers working as intermediaries between divine power and human suffering. The sick flocked to the temples seeking cures, and many found relief through the knowledge Enki had shared. He revealed the mysteries of metallurgy, showing humans how to extract copper and tin from stone, how to combine them into bronze. This new material revolutionized human civilization, providing tools that were harder and more durable than anything previously known. Bronze axes cleared forests more efficiently, bronze plows tilled soil more deeply, bronze weapons provided better defense against enemies. Mathematics advanced under Enki's tutelage. Humans learned geometry, the study of shapes and spaces. They learned astronomy, tracking the movements of celestial bodies, and understanding the patterns of the heavens. These sciences were not mere intellectual exercises, but practical tools for navigation, for agriculture, for understanding the cosmic order. The art of architecture flourished as humans learned to build structures of increasing complexity and beauty. Temples rose toward the sky, ziggurats that symbolized the connection between earth and heaven. Palaces housed kings in splendor, their walls decorated with intricate reliefs and mosaics. Homes became more comfortable and efficient, incorporating clever designs for ventilation, water supply, and waste management. But perhaps Enki's greatest gift to humanity was the gift of law. He helped humans develop codes of justice, systems for resolving disputes and maintaining social order. The earliest law codes were attributed to divine inspiration, and indeed, Enki had a hand in shaping them. These laws established principles that would echo through millennia, that justice should be fair, that punishment should fit the crime, that the weak should be protected from the strong. As civilization advanced, new challenges emerged. Cities grew large and complex, requiring sophisticated administration. Trade networks stretched across vast distances, necessitating systems of accounting and contract enforcement. Different peoples came into contact, sometimes peacefully, sometimes in conflict. Humanity needed wisdom to navigate these challenges, and Enki provided it. But Enki knew he could not solve every problem for humanity. They needed to learn to think for themselves, to make their own decisions, to accept responsibility for their choices. So gradually he began to step back, to offer guidance less frequently, to allow humans to make mistakes and learn from them. This was perhaps the hardest thing for the god who loved humanity so deeply, but it was necessary for their growth. The stories of Enki became legends, passed down through generations. Grandparents told children about the god who had created humanity, who had saved them from the flood, who had taught them all the arts of civilization. These stories were more than entertainment. They were the foundation of human culture, the explanation for why things were as they were, the guide for how to live properly. In the temples, priests studied the ancient texts, trying to understand the mind of Enki. They debated his motives, his methods, his ultimate goals for humanity. Was he a father figure, caring for his children? A craftsman, proud of his creation? A teacher, delighting in the progress of his students? Perhaps he was all of these and more, a complex divine personality that could not be easily categorized. Enki's temple in Eridu became a center of learning, a place where the wisest humans gathered to study and teach. Schools were established there, teaching reading, writing, mathematics, and theology. Students came from distant cities to learn from the masters, and many stayed to become teachers themselves. Knowledge accumulated and was preserved, creating a living tradition of wisdom. The natural world remained under Enki's special care. He ensured that the rivers flowed properly, that springs did not run dry, that rain came in due season. When droughts threatened, prayers to Enki could bring relief. When floods loomed, offerings at his temples could moderate the waters. He remained the god of the Abzu, the deep freshwater ocean that sustained all life. Fish was sacred to Enki, for they lived in his element, the water. Fishermen offered the first catch of their nets to him, thanking him for the bounty of the rivers and seas. Fish appeared in art and architecture associated with Enki, swimming in decorative friezes, carved into temple walls, painted on pottery. They symbolized abundance, fertility, the life-giving power of water, but Enki's influence extended beyond water and fish. He was also the god of wisdom in all its forms: practical knowledge, theoretical understanding, creative insight, moral judgment. Scribes invoked his name before beginning their work. Architects prayed to him before designing buildings. Judges sought his guidance before rendering verdicts. He was the patron of all who used their minds to benefit society. There were times when Enki had to protect humanity from threats beyond their control. When other gods grew angry with human actions, Enki would intervene, arguing for mercy, proposing compromises, using his diplomatic skills to diffuse tensions. He became known as humanity's advocate in the Divine Council, the god who would always speak up for his creation. Not all his fellow gods appreciated this role. Some saw Enki as too soft on humanity, too willing to excuse their faults, too protective of beings who were, after all, merely mortal. These gods argued that humans needed to be kept in their place, reminded of their limitations, punished when they overstepped. But Enki consistently argued for patience, for understanding, for giving humans the freedom to grow and learn. The tension between Enki and Enlil, his brother, continued throughout the ages. Enlil represented order, authority, the strict enforcement of divine law. Enki represented wisdom, flexibility, the recognition that circumstances can change the application of principles. Their debates shaped the relationship between gods and humans, creating a dynamic balance between justice and mercy, between rules and exceptions. Yet despite their disagreements, Enki and Enlil respected each other. They both wanted what was best for creation, though they disagreed about what that meant. Their relationship was complex, marked by both conflict and cooperation, by arguments and reconciliations. In many ways, they needed each other. Enlil's order and Enki's wisdom combining to create a stable yet dynamic cosmos. As centuries passed, Enki's direct involvement in human affairs decreased. This was not neglect, but wisdom. Humanity had matured enough to handle most of its own problems. They had the knowledge, the skills, the institutions needed for civilization to flourish. Enki could step back, confident that his creation would continue to grow and evolve. But he never abandoned humanity entirely. In times of crisis, his presence could still be felt. When faced with impossible challenges, humans could pray to Enki and sometimes receive inspired solutions. When lost and confused, they could meditate on his wisdom and find clarity. He remained available, though less immediately present, like a parent watching over grown children. The legacy of Enki permeated every aspect of Sumerian civilization. Their system of writing, their mathematical knowledge, their agricultural techniques, their legal codes, their medical practices, all bore his fingerprints. He was not just a god to be worshipped, but a continuing presence in daily life, the ultimate source of the knowledge that made civilization possible. Poets composed hymns in Enki's honor, celebrating his wisdom and creativity. These hymns were performed in temples during festivals, their words carrying across courtyards filled with worshippers. The language was beautiful and precise, using metaphor and imagery to convey divine truths. Listening to these hymns, even today, one can feel the reverence and love the ancient Sumerians felt for their creator god. O Enki, Lord of wisdom, Father of humanity, you who shaped us from clay and divine essence, you who taught us the arts of civilization, you who saved us from destruction, hear our prayers and guide us still. Your waters flow through our lands, giving life. Your wisdom illuminates our minds, dispelling ignorance. Your compassion shields us from divine anger. Your patience allows us to learn from our mistakes. We honor you with offerings of fish and grain, with songs of praise and prayers of thanksgiving, with the faithful practice of the skills you taught us, with the just application of the laws you inspired. May your temple stand forever in Eridu. May your name be spoken with reverence through all generations. May your wisdom continue to guide humanity. May your love for us never fail. Such hymns captured the essence of Enki's relationship with humanity. Creator and created, teacher and student, protector and protected, but also something more intimate, more personal, more profound. Enki was not a distant, unknowable deity, but a god who genuinely cared about human welfare, who invested himself in human success, who felt joy at human achievements and sorrow at human suffering. The physical representation of Enki in art and sculpture reflected this accessibility. He was typically shown as a bearded man of mature years, wearing the horned crown that marked divine status. Water flowed from his shoulders in many depictions, symbolizing his control over that element. Fish swam in the streams around him. Sometimes he held a vase from which water eternally poured, representing the endless abundance of the Abzu. But despite these symbols of power, there was something approachable about Enki's representation. His expression was kind, even gentle. His posture suggested openness rather than domination. He was shown teaching, creating, blessing, not conquering or destroying. This was a god you could talk to, reason with, appeal to for help. This was a god who wanted the best for you. The stories of Enki continued to evolve as they were told and retold across generations. Each retelling added new details, new interpretations, new emphasis. Some versions stressed his cleverness, showing how he outwitted other gods to protect humanity. Others emphasized his creativity, celebrating the beauty of his creation. Still others focused on his compassion, recounting how he interceded for humanity again and again. One particularly beloved story told of a time when humanity forgot how to make beer. This might seem like a minor problem, but beer was essential to Sumerian civilization, not just as a beverage, but as a form of currency, a religious offering, a source of nutrition, and a social lubricant. Without beer, Sumerian society would collapse. When Enki learned of this crisis, he immediately took action. He descended to Earth and appeared to a talented brewer in Eridu. In a dream, he revealed the complete process of beer making, from selecting barley to the final fermentation. He even taught her how to make different varieties of beer, each with its own flavour and strength. When the brewer woke, she remembered everything and quickly taught others. Beer making was restored, and civilization was saved. This story illustrates several important aspects of Enki's character. First, he paid attention to human needs, even seemingly minor ones. Second, he was willing to intervene directly when necessary. Third, he trusted humans to receive and use knowledge responsibly. And fourth, he understood that civilization depends on many small things working together, not just grand gestures and epic events. Another story told of a great debate between Enki and the goddess Ninhursag about which was superior, agriculture or herding. Ninhursag argued that herding was nobler, requiring skill and courage to manage animals. Enki countered that agriculture was more fundamental, providing the grain that sustained civilization. They debated for days, each making compelling arguments, neither able to defeat the other. Finally, they agreed that both agriculture and herding were essential, that civilization needed both to flourish. Enki blessed the farmers, ensuring their crops would grow abundantly. Ninhursag blessed the shepherds, ensuring their flocks would multiply. Together, these blessings brought prosperity to humanity. The story taught that cooperation was better than competition, that different skills and roles were all valuable, that divine wisdom recognized complexity rather than imposing simplistic hierarchies. The relationship between Enki and Ninhursag was itself complex and fascinating. In some stories, she was his sister, in others, his wife, in still others, his creative partner. They worked together on many projects, combining his wisdom with her nurturing power to bring forth life in its many forms. Their union, whether literal or symbolic, represented the balance of masculine and feminine principles in creation. One of the most mysterious stories involving Enki concerned the me, the fundamental principles or divine decrees that governed all aspects of existence. These were not abstract concepts, but actual objects or forces that could be possessed and transferred. Whoever controlled the me controlled the corresponding aspect of reality, whether kingship, warfare, music, or any other domain of existence. Enki was the original keeper of the me, storing them in his temple in the Abzu. He guarded them carefully, understanding their immense power. But one day, the goddess Inanna visited him, determined to acquire the me for her own city of Uruk. She appeared before Enki in all her beauty and charm, and Enki, delighted by her visit, offered her abundant hospitality. They feasted together, drinking cup after cup of beer. As Enki grew increasingly intoxicated, Inanna began to ask him for the me, one by one. In his inebriated state, Enki generously gave them to her. The me of kingship, of warfare, of music, of craft, of wisdom itself. He gave away over 100 me before finally passing out. When Enki awoke the next morning with a terrible headache, he was horrified to discover what he had done. The me were gone, and with them, much of his power and authority. He sent his minister Izimu to chase after Inanna and retrieve the me, but she had already fled back to Uruk on her boat of heaven. A chase ensued, with Enki sending various monsters and obstacles to stop Inanna, but she overcame them all and reached Uruk safely. In the end, Enki had to accept that the me now resided in Uruk, as well as in Eridu. Power had been redistributed. Civilization would no longer be centered in one place, but would spread to multiple cities, each with its own strengths and specializations. This was actually a positive development, as it made civilization more resilient and diverse, though Enki had not intended it to happen quite this way. The story of Enki and Inanna reveals an important truth about wisdom. It can be outsmarted by youth and beauty. Even the wisest of gods has vulnerabilities, blind spots, moments of weakness. Enki's fallibility made him more relatable to humans, who faced their own struggles with temptation and poor judgment. If even Enki could make mistakes, humans shouldn't be too hard on themselves for their own failures. Yet Enki's mistakes were always redeemable. He learned from them, adapted to new circumstances, found ways to make the best of situations he had not intended. This flexibility, this resilience, was perhaps his greatest lesson to humanity. Life rarely goes according to plan, but wisdom means finding new paths when the old ones are blocked, turning obstacles into opportunities, making the best of any situation. The sacred precinct of Eridu, Enki's primary earthly dwelling, was a place of great beauty and serenity. Gardens surrounded the temple, carefully tended to display the full abundance of nature. Date palms provided shade and fruit. Flowers bloomed in carefully arranged beds. Pools of water, fed by underground springs connected to the Abzu, reflected the sky and provided a home for fish and aquatic plants. Within the temple itself, the atmosphere was cool and calm. The thick mud brick walls kept out the desert heat. Light entered through carefully placed windows and openings, creating patterns of shadow and illumination that changed throughout the day. The air smelled of incense, of water, of the oil lamps that burned perpetually, before Enki's statue. The statue of Enki in the Holy of Holies was a masterpiece of ancient craftsmanship. Carved from stone and decorated with precious metals and gems, it depicted the god seated on his throne, hands extended in blessing. Water flowed from a channel beneath the statue, emerging from the floor and running through the temple in a small stream before disappearing again into the earth. This water was considered especially holy, carrying Enki's blessing directly from the Abzu. Pilgrims came from across Mesopotamia to visit Enki's temple in Eridu. They brought offerings of fish, grain, beer, and crafted objects. They sought blessings for their endeavours, whether building a new house, starting a business, getting married, or beginning a long journey. The priests of Enki would receive these offerings, conduct the appropriate rituals, and convey the god's blessings to the petitioners. The priesthood of Enki was learned and wise. To serve the god of wisdom, one had to embody wisdom oneself. Priests spent years in study, mastering reading and writing, mathematics and astronomy, history and theology. They memorized the great myths and hymns, learned the proper procedures for every ritual, understood the complex symbolism of religious art and architecture. But knowledge alone was not enough. The priests of Enki were also expected to show compassion, to help those in need, to use their wisdom for the benefit of the community. They served as counselors, mediators, teachers, and healers. They embodied Enki's care for humanity, acting as his representatives on Earth. The daily rituals in Enki's temple followed ancient patterns established in the earliest days of the city. Each morning began with the washing of the god's statue, a symbolic cleansing that renewed divine presence. Offerings of food and drink were presented at dawn, midday, and evening. Hymns were sung at prescribed hours, their melodies echoing through the temple complex. Special festivals marked the changing seasons and commemorated important events in Enki's mythology. The New Year festival was particularly important, celebrating the renewal of time and the reaffirmation of cosmic order. During this festival, the story of creation was recited in full, priests taking on the roles of different gods and acting out the ancient drama. The people participated enthusiastically, seeing in the ritual a reminder of their connection to divine power. The festival of the Abzu celebrated Enki's domain, honouring the fresh waters that sustained life. Processions wound through the city, carrying a sacred image of Enki to the riverside. There, rituals were performed to ensure the continued flow of water, offerings were cast into the river, and prayers were said for abundant irrigation and good fishing. The festival culminated in a great feast where fish was the honoured dish, prepared in numerous ways and shared by all. In the workshops adjacent to the temple, craftsmen practiced their trades. Under Enki's patronage, scribes copied ancient texts onto fresh clay tablets, preserving knowledge for future generations. Metalworkers created bronze objects using techniques Enki had revealed. Architects designed buildings incorporating principles of sacred geometry. All of them saw their work as a form of worship, a way of honouring the god who had taught humanity these skills. The temple also housed a library, a collection of clay tablets containing everything from administrative records to literary texts. This library was one of the great treasures of the ancient world, preserving knowledge that would otherwise have been lost. Scholars came from distant cities to consult these texts, copying important works to bring back to their own cities, contributing to the spread of learning across Mesopotamia. Among the texts preserved in the library were those that claimed to record Enki's own words, his teachings to humanity. These texts were studied with special reverence, analysed for deeper meanings, memorised by students who hoped to embody divine wisdom. Whether these texts truly originated with Enki, or were human compositions inspired by his teachings, was perhaps not the most important question. What mattered was that they contained profound wisdom that helped people live better lives. One such text, a wisdom poem attributed to Enki, advised, "Let your heart be open to learning, for wisdom is a treasure that never diminishes. Let your words be measured and true, for false speech damages both speaker and listener. Let your actions align with your values, for integrity is the foundation of a good life. Let your compassion extend to all beings, for we are all part of the great web of creation. These principles guided not just individuals but society as a whole. Laws were crafted to promote honesty and fairness. Economic systems were designed to ensure that prosperity was shared, not hoarded. Social hierarchies were tempered by obligations. The powerful had duties toward the weak, the rich toward the poor, rulers toward the ruled. This was Enki's vision of civilization. Not just material prosperity, but moral order. Not just physical survival, but meaningful existence. Of course, reality often fell short of the ideal. Humans being imperfect, their societies were imperfect too. Injustice occurred. Laws were broken. The powerful sometimes exploited the weak. Corruption crept into even the most well-designed institutions, but the ideal remained, constantly calling society back toward its better nature, providing a standard against which to measure reality and find it wanting. Enki's teachings about water management were particularly crucial for Mesopotamian civilization. The region depended entirely on irrigation from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Without careful management of water resources, agriculture was impossible, and without agriculture, cities could not exist. Enki was credited with revealing the principles of hydraulic engineering that made civilization possible in this challenging environment. The ancient engineers who designed irrigation systems saw themselves as carrying out Enki's work. They surveyed the land, calculated slopes, dug canals, built dams and reservoirs. Their goal was to distribute water evenly across the fields, ensuring that every farmer had access to this precious resource. The mathematics involved was complex, requiring precise measurements and calculations, another gift from Enki, the god of wisdom. When an irrigation system worked properly, it was almost magical. Water flowed exactly where it was needed, exactly when it was needed. Fields that would have been desert bloomed with crops. Cities thrived in the midst of arid lands. This was the power of applied knowledge, of wisdom translated into action. This was Enki's gift made manifest in the world. But water could also be destructive. Floods could devastate cities, wash away fields, kill thousands. The memory of the Great Flood remained vivid in Mesopotamian consciousness, a reminder that water must be respected, that nature's power dwarfed human capability. The challenge was to work with water, to guide it without trying to dominate it, to be humble before its power while still using it for human benefit. Enki's wisdom taught balance in all things. Too much water was as bad as too little. Too much knowledge could be as dangerous as ignorance. Too much freedom led to chaos, but too much control led to stagnation. The wise person, like the skilled irrigator, found the middle way, adjusting constantly to changing circumstances, responding flexibly to new challenges. This philosophy of balance extended to personal life as well. Enki's followers believed in moderation, enjoying life's pleasures without excess, working hard but also resting, pursuing success while maintaining ethical standards. The good life was not about extremes but about harmony, about keeping all aspects of existence in proper proportion. Sleep itself was honoured as a gift from the gods, a necessary respite that allowed the body to recover and the mind to process the day's experiences. Dreams were seen as messages from the divine realm, opportunities for gods like Enki to communicate with humans when they were most receptive. Dream interpretation was a respected skill, and priests of Enki were often consulted to help understand particularly vivid or puzzling dreams. The dream world was liminal space, neither fully divine nor fully mortal. In dreams, impossible things became possible. The dead could speak to the living, the future could be glimpsed, divine beings could appear directly to humans. Enki, as the god of wisdom and mysteries, was particularly associated with the dream realm. Many stories told of him appearing in dreams to teach, to warn, to guide, to inspire. One such story involved a young scribe who was struggling to master a particularly difficult type of mathematical calculation. He studied for months, but the concept eluded him. Frustrated and discouraged, he finally fell asleep at his desk, his head resting on the very tablet that contained the problem he could not solve. In his dream, Enki appeared to him. The god did not explain the solution directly, but instead asked the young man a series of questions. Each question led the scribe deeper into understanding, not just of the specific problem, but of the underlying principles. When he woke, The solution was clear in his mind. More importantly, he now understood the general principle and could apply it to countless similar problems. This story illustrated an important aspect of Enki's teaching method. He did not simply give answers, but helped people develop their own understanding. True wisdom was not memorized facts, but the ability to think, to analyze, to solve new problems using fundamental principles. Enki wanted humanity to be independent thinkers, not mere repositories of received knowledge. The scientific method, though not formalized until millennia later, had its roots in this approach. Observe carefully, ask questions, test hypotheses, learn from failures, refine understanding. These principles, embodied in Enki's teaching style, guided the development of all fields of knowledge in ancient Mesopotamia. Astronomy was perhaps the most advanced science of the ancient world. The Sumerians observed the sky meticulously, tracking the movements of stars, planets, and the moon. They developed sophisticated mathematical models to predict celestial events. This knowledge had practical applications, determining the calendar, timing agricultural activities, navigating. But it also had a deeper significance. The heavens were the realm of the gods, and celestial movements reflected divine will. By understanding the patterns of the sky, humans could gain insight into cosmic order. Enki had revealed the mathematical principles underlying celestial mechanics, giving humans the tools to comprehend a tiny fraction of divine knowledge. Every observation, every calculation, brought humans closer to understanding the mind of the gods. Medicine was another field where Enki's wisdom proved crucial. Disease was understood as having both physical and spiritual causes. Treatment therefore required both practical remedies and religious rituals. The physicians of ancient Mesopotamia were skilled in both aspects, using herbal medicines and surgical techniques alongside prayers and offerings to the gods. Enki was invoked in many healing rituals. As the god of water, he could cleanse impurities. As the god of wisdom, he could reveal the cause of illness. As humanity's protector, he was motivated to help the sick recover. Medical texts often began with an invocation to Enki, asking for his guidance in diagnosis and treatment. The connection between water and healing was particularly important. Water was used in purification rituals, washing away both physical dirt and spiritual contamination. Certain springs were believed to have special healing properties, their waters flowing directly from the Abzu and thus carrying Enki's power. Pilgrims would travel great distances to bathe in these sacred waters, hoping for cures. Psychological ailments were also treated with respect and care. The ancient Mesopotamians recognized that mental suffering was as real as physical pain. Depression, anxiety, traumatic memories, all were acknowledged as genuine problems requiring treatment. Rituals, counseling, and community support were all employed to help those suffering from mental distress. Enki's compassion extended to these sufferers as well. Stories told of him comforting those in despair, giving hope to the hopeless, bringing light to those lost in darkness. These were not just metaphors, but real spiritual experiences reported by people who felt the presence of the god in their darkest moments. Whether these experiences were literally divine interventions or psychological phenomena is less important than their effect. They brought healing and renewed purpose to lives that had lost direction. The theme of redemption recurs throughout Enki's mythology. No matter how far humans fell, no matter how badly they failed, there was always the possibility of return, of starting over, of being renewed. This was the lesson of the flood story. Even after humanity was nearly destroyed, Enki ensured they had another chance. Failure was not final. Mistakes could be corrected. Every day brought new possibilities. This hopeful message resonated deeply with the people of ancient Mesopotamia. Life was hard. Disasters struck without warning. Disease and death were constant companions. The political situation was often unstable, with wars and invasions disrupting normal life. In such a context, the message that the gods had not abandoned humanity, that wisdom and compassion still guided the cosmos, was profoundly comforting. The relationship between humans and gods in Mesopotamian religion was more reciprocal than might be expected. Yes, humans served the gods through worship and offerings, but the gods also needed humans. They needed worshippers to acknowledge them, offerings to sustain them, temples to house them. Without humans, the gods would be diminished. This mutual dependence created a bond between the divine and mortal realms. Enki exemplified this reciprocal relationship. He had created humanity not to have slaves, but to have partners, beings who could appreciate creation and contribute to its ongoing development. Human achievements delighted him. Human wisdom, even when it was a mere shadow of his own, filled him with pride. He was invested in human success because humans were, in a very real sense, his legacy. As civilizations rose and fell across Mesopotamia, Enki's worship continued. Even when political power shifted, when new dynasties arose, when foreign conquerors imposed their rule, the god of wisdom retained his importance. Different peoples might call him by different names, Ea in Akkadian, for example, but his essential character remained consistent. He was the wise creator, the compassionate protector, the source of knowledge and civilization. The myths of Enki were eventually recorded in the cuneiform tablets that have survived to the present day. Modern archaeologists, excavating the ruins of ancient cities, have recovered these tablets and painstakingly translated them. Through this process, Enki's stories have been rescued from oblivion, allowing people thousands of years later to hear his ancient wisdom. Reading these texts today, one is struck by how human they are. The gods they describe have personalities, emotions, conflicts, and reconciliations, just like people. This anthropomorphism was not naive but deliberate. The ancients understood that we can only comprehend the divine through human categories, that any description of God must use human language and concepts. The myths were not meant to be literal descriptions, but pointers toward truths too large to capture in words. Enki's wisdom speaks across the millennia. His emphasis on knowledge, on compassion, on adaptability remains relevant. The specific technologies have changed. We no longer rely on bronze tools or cuneiform writing, but the underlying principles endure. We still need to manage water resources wisely. We still need laws that promote justice. We still need to balance individual freedom with social responsibility. We still need compassion for those who suffer. The story of Enki reminds us that civilization is not inevitable. It must be built, maintained, defended against both external threats and internal decay. Every generation must learn anew the lessons of the past, must rediscover the wisdom that makes civilized life possible. We are not so different from those ancient Sumerians, gathering in Eridu to honour the god who taught their ancestors. Perhaps that is why these ancient stories still resonate. They speak to something fundamental in the human experience, something that transcends cultural and temporal boundaries. The need for wisdom, the importance of compassion, the value of knowledge, the necessity of water, the fragility of civilization, the possibility of renewal. These themes are universal, as relevant today as they were 5,000 years ago. As we drift towards sleep listening to these ancient tales, we participate in a tradition stretching back to the earliest human civilizations. Our ancestors told these stories to help them understand their world, to pass on wisdom to the next generation, to find comfort in the midst of life's difficulties. We continue that tradition, finding in these ancient words something that speaks to our modern souls. Enki's gift to humanity was not just the specific pieces of knowledge he revealed, but the principle that knowledge itself is valuable, that understanding is worth pursuing, that wisdom makes life better. In an age of information overload, this message needs to be heard. Not all knowledge is equal. Wisdom means not just knowing things, but understanding their significance, their relationships, their proper applications. The God of wisdom also teaches humility. Despite all human achievement, despite all our accumulated knowledge, we are still mortal, still limited, still prone to error. We see through a glass darkly, understanding only fragments of truth. This recognition should not lead to despair, but to continued effort, to the humble pursuit of greater understanding, to respect for those who know things we do not. Enki's relationship with water reminds us of our dependence on nature. We are not separate from the natural world, but part of it. Our survival depends on natural systems functioning properly. When we damage those systems, we damage ourselves. The ancient wisdom of living in harmony with nature is not nostalgic primitivism, but practical necessity. The flood story carries both a warning and a promise. The warning: natural forces are powerful beyond human control, and human arrogance can lead to disaster. The promise: even after catastrophe, renewal is possible. Life persists. Wisdom survives. The human story continues. This message has sustained people through countless disasters, from ancient floods to modern crises. Enki's compassion for humanity, his willingness to defy divine consensus to protect his creation, models a crucial ethical principle. The powerful have obligations toward the weak. Authority must be tempered by compassion. Law must be balanced by mercy. Justice must be informed by understanding. These principles, encoded in the Enki myths, helped shape the ethical foundations of Western civilization. The story of Enki and Inanna, where the god loses the me through carelessness, teaches that even wisdom has its limits. Nobody is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how we respond to our failures. Enki accepted the redistribution of power, adapted to new circumstances, continued his work despite setbacks. This resilience, this ability to bounce back from failure, may be wisdom's most important component. In the sacred precinct of Eridu, in the cool depths of Enki's temple, priests once conducted rituals that connected earth to heaven, humans to gods, present to past. Those rituals are long gone, the temple in ruins, the priests dust, but the wisdom they embodied persists. It lives in every irrigation system that brings water to thirsty crops. It survives in every legal system that seeks to balance justice and mercy. It continues in every school where knowledge is passed to the next generation. We are Enki's children, whether we acknowledge him or not. The civilization we inhabit, with all its technological wonders and accumulated knowledge, rests on foundations he helped lay. Every time we use mathematics, we employ tools he revealed. Every time we write, we use a technology whose ultimate origin traces to his gift. Every time we turn on a tap and receive clean water, we benefit from principles of water management he taught. But more than these practical benefits, Enki offers something deeper, a vision of what it means to be fully human. Not merely surviving, but flourishing. Not merely existing, but creating. Not merely consuming, but contributing. Not merely receiving, but giving. He shows us that humans at their best are wise, compassionate, creative, and generous, reflecting, in our small way, the divine wisdom that called us into being. As consciousness fades and sleep approaches, as the boundary between waking and dreaming grows thin, perhaps we can sense something of what those ancient worshippers felt. A presence greater than ourselves, a wisdom deeper than our understanding, a compassion that embraces our imperfections, a hope that tomorrow brings new possibilities. These are Enki's gifts, available to anyone who seeks them with an open heart and curious mind. The waters of the Abzu flow eternal, invisible beneath our feet, sustaining life, connecting past to present to future. We drink from wells our ancestors dug, using knowledge our forebears acquired, benefiting from wisdom accumulated across generations. We are links in a chain stretching back to the dawn of civilization and forward into an unknown future. This is our inheritance from Enki, the knowledge that we are not alone, not isolated, but part of something larger, older, and more meaningful than any individual life. In dreams, perhaps, Enki still teaches. When we wake with sudden insight, with unexpected understanding, with creative solutions to intractable problems, perhaps that is his continuing gift. The God of Wisdom works in mysterious ways, through inspiration and intuition as much as through careful study. He honours both the analytical mind and the creative spirit, both disciplined thought and playful imagination. The Lost Books of Enki are not really lost. They were never separate books, but the living tradition of Mesopotamian civilization, encoded in myths and rituals, laws and practices, temples and technologies. These books were written not on tablets, but in the fabric of culture itself, in the way people lived and thought and organised their societies. They persist wherever wisdom is valued, wherever compassion guides policy, wherever knowledge serves human flourishing. We read these books every time we choose understanding over ignorance, compassion over cruelty, creativity over destruction, hope over despair. We write new chapters every time we pass knowledge to the next generation, solve problems that seemed impossible, build institutions that serve the common good, create beauty that lifts the human spirit. We are all authors now, contributing our verses to the ongoing story that began when Enki first shaped humans from clay and divine breath. The night deepens. The stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. following laws that Enki helped establish when the cosmos was young. In our dreams, we may swim in the waters of the Abzu, that eternal source of wisdom and life. We may hear the voice of the god who loved humanity enough to defy the divine council, who risked everything to give his creation a future. We may feel his presence, not as an external entity, but as the deepest truth of our own nature. We are beings capable of wisdom, deserving of compassion, called to create and nurture and protect. Sleep comes as a gift, as necessary as water, as renewing as the annual flood. In sleep, the conscious mind rests, allowing the deeper self to process, to integrate, to heal. Dreams carry messages we cannot hear while awake, truths too subtle for conscious comprehension. The boundary between self and world dissolves, and for a time we return to the undifferentiated unity from which all things emerged. Enki understands sleep. He knows that growth happens in darkness, that wisdom requires periods of rest and integration, that the conscious mind must periodically release control to allow deeper processes to unfold. The seeds he planted in humanity needed time to germinate, needed the dark soil of unconsciousness to send down roots before they could grow toward the light. And so we sleep, secure in the knowledge that when we wake the world will still be there, the sun will rise, water will flow, life will continue. The cosmos that Enki helped create is stable and reliable, governed by laws that can be understood, responsive to wisdom, open to human participation. We are not powerless victims of fate, but active agents in an unfolding story, equipped with the tools we need to face whatever challenges come. In the morning, we will rise and resume our daily work, contributing our small part to the great project of civilization. We will use the skills Enki taught, apply the principles he revealed, embody the wisdom he exemplified. We will make mistakes, as all humans do, but we will learn from them, as Enki taught us. We will face difficulties, but we will overcome them with creativity and persistence. We will sometimes despair, but we will remember that renewal is always possible. In the depths of the Abzu, in the cool dark waters beneath the world, Enki remains, eternal and unchanging, the source from which all wisdom flows. And we, his children, sleep secure in the knowledge that we are part of his story, carriers of his gifts, bearers of his wisdom into an ever-changing world. The night is long and deep. The waters flow eternal. The god of wisdom watches, and we sleep, dreaming dreams that connect us to the very beginning, to the moment when conscious life first emerged from the primordial waters, when Enki shaped humanity with his own hands and breathed into them the spark of understanding. There are other tales, other mysteries hidden in the ancient texts, stories of Enki's adventures with his brother gods, his conflicts and reconciliations, his triumphs and defeats. Each story carries layers of meaning, teachings wrapped in narrative, wisdom encoded in myth. One such tale speaks of the time when Enki travelled to visit his father Anu in the heavens. The journey itself was perilous, requiring passage through 7 gates, each guarded by powerful sentinels. At each gate, Enki had to demonstrate his worthiness, answering riddles, solving puzzles, proving his divine nature through displays of wisdom and power. The first gate tested knowledge. The Guardian asked Enki to explain the nature of existence, the relationship between being and non-being, the origin of consciousness. Enki's answer was so profound, so beautifully articulated, that the Guardian wept with joy and immediately opened the gate, bowing low as the god of wisdom passed through. The second gate tested compassion. Here, Enki encountered souls in torment, beings suffering from their own mistakes and poor choices. The Guardian challenged him to either pass by without concern, as befitted a mighty god, or to stop and help these lowly creatures, thus delaying his important journey. Without hesitation, Enki stopped. He spoke to each suffering soul, offering comfort and counsel, teaching them how to transcend their pain. Only when all had been helped did he continue, and the Guardian, impressed by his compassion, opened the gate with reverence. The third gate tested creativity. The Guardian presented Enki with raw materials, clay, water, fire, air, and challenged him to create something that had never existed before. Enki's hands moved swiftly, shaping and moulding, combining elements in novel ways. What emerged was a creature of sublime beauty, neither fully of earth nor of heaven, a being that could exist in both realms. The Guardian recognized genius when he saw it, and the gate swung wide. The fourth gate tested humility. Here, the Guardian recounted all of Enki's achievements, all his great works, all the praise that had been heaped upon him. Then the Guardian asked, "Are you proud of these accomplishments? Do you consider yourself superior to other gods?" Enki smiled gently and replied, "I am grateful for the opportunities I've been given to serve creation. Whatever wisdom I possess is not mine alone, but flows from the source of all being. I am merely a vessel through which divine creativity expresses itself." Satisfied with this humble response, the Guardian opened the gate. The fifth gate tested courage. Beyond this threshold lay terrible dangers, forces that could destroy even a god who was not fully committed to his purpose. The Guardian asked Enki if he was willing to risk everything, to face potential annihilation, to continue forward despite the dangers. Enki looked into the darkness beyond the gate and said simply, "I go forward because I must. Fear is natural, but it need not govern my choices. Wisdom requires courage, the courage to face the unknown, to challenge the established order when necessary, to stand firm in the face of opposition." The Guardian nodded approvingly and stepped aside. The sixth gate tested loyalty. Here, Enki was, shown visions of humanity's future, all the suffering they would endure, all the foolish choices they would make, all the ways they would disappoint and frustrate their creator. The Guardian asked, "Knowing all this, do you still claim them as your creation? Do you still love them? Would you still defend them against divine wrath?" Enki watched the visions unfold, his face betraying the pain he felt, but his voice was steady when he answered, "Yes, they are imperfect, as all mortal beings must be, but they are also capable of extraordinary beauty, profound wisdom, and great love. I claim them. I love them. I will always defend them." The gate opened, and the Guardian whispered, "You are worthy." The seventh and final gate tested vision. Beyond this threshold lay Anu's throne room, the seat of ultimate divine authority. But the Guardian did not ask about the past or present. Instead, he asked Enki to describe the future, not just tomorrow or next year, but the ultimate destiny of creation itself. What was the purpose of it all? Where was everything heading? What would be the final outcome of the cosmic drama that had begun with the first stirring of consciousness in the void? Enki stood silent for a long moment, his eyes distant, seeing across vast expanses of time. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of prophecy. Creation is not a completed work, but an ongoing process. The universe evolves toward greater complexity, greater consciousness, greater beauty. Humanity is not the final expression of this evolution, but a step along the way. They will give rise to forms of being we cannot yet imagine, modes of consciousness that transcend our current understanding. The ultimate destiny of creation is the full realization of its own divine nature, the moment when creation becomes conscious of itself as creator, when the created recognizes itself as divine. In that moment all will return to the source, but enriched, deepened, made more beautiful by the long journey through time and space and experience. The final Guardian bowed deeply, more deeply than any of the others. "You see truly, wise Enki. You understand the great mystery. Pass through, and may your vision guide all of creation toward its destiny." The seventh gate opened, and Enki entered his father's presence. The meeting with Anu was brief but significant. The father god blessed his son's work with humanity, acknowledging that despite the controversy and conflict it had caused, the creation of conscious mortals had been necessary and right. Anu granted Enki additional powers and authorities, ensuring that he would always have the resources needed to guide humanity through their long development. But the most important gift Anu gave his son was validation. "You chose correctly," Anu said. "When faced with the choice between order and growth, between stability and evolution, between the comfort of stasis and the risk of change, you chose growth, evolution, and change. This is the way of wisdom. The universe is not meant to be static but dynamic, not fixed but flowing, not dead but vibrantly alive. Through humanity you have ensured that creation will continue to evolve, to surprise us, to reveal new facets of the divine nature. For this, all of us are in your debt." Enki returned to Earth carrying his father's blessing, but also carrying a heavy responsibility. He now understood more fully the scope of what he had initiated. Humanity was not just another species, not just workers for the gods, not just interesting creatures to observe. They were the seeds of something far greater, beings with the potential to evolve into forms of consciousness that even the gods could not fully anticipate. This knowledge shaped all of Enki's subsequent interactions with humanity. He became more careful in what he taught them, more strategic in how he guided their development. Some knowledge had to be withheld, not because he wanted to keep humans ignorant, but because they were not yet ready to handle certain truths. Power without wisdom was dangerous, and wisdom took time to develop. The art of war, for instance, was something Enki taught reluctantly. He knew that humanity would inevitably discover conflict, that competition for resources would lead to violence. Better that they learn disciplined warfare, governed by rules and honour, than descend into chaotic bloodshed. So he taught them strategy and tactics, but he also taught them ethics, the principles of just war, the importance of restraint, the need to protect non-combatants, the obligation to seek peace even in the midst of conflict. Similarly, Enki taught humans about power, how to organise societies, how to establish hierarchies, how to create governments, but he also taught them about the dangers of power, the way it could corrupt those who held it, the necessity of checks and balances, the importance of accountability. Every gift of knowledge came with warnings about its potential misuse. The relationship between Enki and the various kings of Mesopotamia was particularly important. As the patron of wisdom, Enki was also the patron of kingship, not as raw power, but as wise governance. He taught rulers that their authority came with responsibilities, that they were accountable not just to other gods, but to the people they ruled. The ideal king in Enki's vision was a shepherd, not a master, but a caretaker. The king should protect the weak, provide for those in need, ensure justice, maintain order, and promote prosperity. But the king should also be humble, recognizing that his wisdom was limited, that he needed advisors and counselors, that he could make mistakes and should be willing to correct them. Many ancient texts describe kings seeking Enki's guidance in dreams or visions. These were not casual conversations, but profound spiritual experiences that shaped the course of nations. Enki would appear to a troubled ruler and offer advice, sometimes practical, sometimes cryptic, always aimed at promoting wise governance. One famous story tells of a king who was about to launch a war of conquest against a neighbouring city. The king came to Enki's temple to seek the god's blessing on his military campaign. That night, Enki appeared to him in a dream. But instead of blessing the war, Enki showed the king visions of the future, the destruction that would result from the conflict, the lives that would be lost, the civilizations that would be damaged, the long-term consequences of his choice. The king saw cities burning, fields laid waste, children orphaned, families destroyed. He saw how his temporary victory would plant seeds of resentment that would grow into future conflicts. He saw how the resources spent on war could instead have been used to build irrigation canals, establish schools, support artists and craftsmen, improve the lives of his own people. When the king woke, he was shaken to his core. He abandoned his plans for conquest and instead sent envoys to the neighbouring city, proposing trade agreements and mutual defence pacts. The diplomatic initiative succeeded, and both cities prospered. The king became known as one of the wisest rulers of his age, and he credited Enki with saving him from a terrible mistake. Not all kings were so wise. Some ignored Enki's counsel, pursuing power and glory at the expense of their people's welfare. These rulers often met tragic ends, their dynasties collapsing, their names forgotten or remembered only with contempt. The lesson was clear. Wisdom could not be ignored without consequences. The universe had its own logic, its own justice, and those who violated fundamental principles would eventually face the results of their choices. Enki's influence extended beyond the political realm into every aspect of human culture. In the realm of family life, he taught the importance of balance and mutual respect. Marriages should be partnerships, not dominations. Parents should guide their children with love, not just authority. Families should be havens of support and affection, not battlegrounds of conflict and control. In economic life, Enki promoted fairness and sustainability. Trade should benefit all parties, not just the powerful. Contracts should be honoured, debts should be reasonable, with provisions for forgiveness when circumstances made repayment impossible. The land should be cultivated carefully, not exploited to exhaustion. Economic systems should serve human flourishing, not the other way around. In artistic life, Enki encouraged experimentation and excellence. Art was not mere decoration but a way of understanding truth, of expressing the inexpressible, of connecting the human and divine. Poets, musicians, sculptors, painters, all were engaged in sacred work, even when their subjects were secular. Through art, humans accessed aspects of reality that could not be reached through reason alone. The great epic poems of Mesopotamia were understood to be inspired by Enki. The Epic of Gilgamesh, perhaps the most famous of all ancient texts, contained wisdom about mortality, friendship, the search for meaning, and the acceptance of human limitations. These were all themes close to Enki's heart, lessons he wanted humanity to learn. In the story of Gilgamesh, we see a king who begins as a tyrant, obsessed with his own power and glory. Through friendship with Enkidu, through the pain of loss, through a failed quest for immortality, Gilgamesh is transformed into a wise ruler who understands his place in the cosmic order. This arc of transformation, from ignorance to wisdom, from arrogance to humility, from selfishness to service, was the ideal journey Enki envisioned for all humans. The relationship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu was particularly significant. Enkidu, created from clay by the gods as a wild man of nature, is civilized through contact with humanity. He learns to speak, to use tools, to appreciate beauty, to understand ethics. In this, Enkidu recapitulates the journey of humanity itself, moving from a state of nature to a state of culture. But the story also shows the cost of civilization. Enkidu loses his innocence, his unity with nature, his simple contentment. He gains much, but also loses much. This ambiguity was intentional. Enki never claimed that civilization was purely beneficial, only that it was necessary for the fulfillment of human potential. Every gain involves some loss. Wisdom means understanding this and choosing wisely. The death of Enkidu and Gilgamesh's grief were portrayed with profound emotional depth. The epic does not shy away from the pain of loss, the terror of mortality, the desperate human desire to escape death. Gilgamesh's quest for immortality takes him to the ends of the earth, where he meets Utnapishtim, the Sumerian equivalent of Ziusudra, the survivor of the Great Flood. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh the story of the flood, explaining how he gained immortality. But he also makes clear that this gift was unique, never to be repeated. Mortality is humanity's destiny, and no amount of heroism or determination can change this fundamental fact. Gilgamesh must accept his mortality and find meaning within the boundaries of his finite life. This acceptance is the final stage of wisdom. To truly mature, humans must come to terms with their limitations. They must stop raging against the inevitable and instead focus on living well within the time they have. They must create meaning through their actions, their relationships, their contributions to the ongoing life of their communities. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk transformed. He is no longer the arrogant tyrant he once was. He has learned compassion through suffering, wisdom through loss. He devotes the rest of his life to being a good king, building magnificent walls around his city, promoting justice, supporting the arts, caring for his people. His mortality is unchanged, but his life has gained meaning and purpose. This was Enki's ultimate gift to humanity. Not the escape from mortality, but the ability to create meaning despite mortality. Humans would die, but their contributions would live on. Their children would remember them. Their works would endure. The civilization they helped build would continue, evolving and growing long after any individual had passed. The temples of Mesopotamia embodied this principle. Each temple was built to last for generations, constructed with materials and techniques designed for permanence. When a king built or renovated a temple, he was creating something that would outlive him, something that would serve his descendants, something that connected past, present, and future. The foundation ceremonies for temples were elaborate affairs, involving prayers, offerings, and the burial of foundation deposits, inscribed cylinders or tablets that recorded the builder's name and purpose. These deposits ensured that future generations would know who had built the temple and why. They were a way of speaking across time, of leaving a message for people not yet born. Enki's own temple in Eridu underwent many renovations over the centuries. Each generation added to it, modified it, adapted it to changing needs. The result was a building that told the story of the city itself, layer upon layer of construction chronicling centuries of continuous habitation. Archaeological excavations of the site have revealed this complex history, showing how the sacred space evolved while maintaining its essential character. The temple layout was deeply symbolic. At the centre was the Holy of Holies, where the statue of Enki resided. This was the most sacred space, accessible only to the highest priests. Surrounding this central sanctuary were courtyards, storage rooms, workshops, and living quarters for the temple staff. The entire complex was designed to be a self-sufficient community, a microcosm of civilization itself. The outer walls of the temple were often decorated with elaborate patterns, interlocking geometric designs, stylized representations of water and fish, cuneiform inscriptions containing hymns and prayers. These decorations were not mere ornamentation but teaching tools, visual reminders of Enki's nature and his gifts to humanity. The water that flowed through the temple, emerging from springs connected to the Abzu, was channeled through carefully designed courses. It filled ritual baths used for purification, flowed through decorative fountains, irrigated the temple gardens, and eventually returned to the earth. This circulation of water symbolized the cycle of life itself, emerging from the divine source, sustaining existence, returning to the source to begin again. Pilgrims who came to Enki's temple would undergo elaborate purification rituals before entering the sacred precincts. They would bathe in the holy water, dress in clean garments, abstain from certain foods, and spend time in prayer and meditation. This preparation was not mere formality but spiritual discipline, a way of setting aside ordinary consciousness to become receptive to divine presence. The experience of entering Enki's temple was designed to be transformative. As you passed through the gates, you left behind the mundane world and entered a sacred space where different rules applied. The architecture, the decoration, the play of light and shadow, the sound of flowing water, the smell of incense, all combined to create an atmosphere that lifted consciousness beyond ordinary concerns. In the central sanctuary, standing before Enki's statue, pilgrims would make their offerings and prayers. Some sought healing for themselves or loved ones. Others asked for wisdom to solve problems or make difficult decisions. Still others came simply to express gratitude, to acknowledge the gifts they had received, to connect with the divine source of all good things. The priests who served in the temple were trained to help pilgrims interpret their experiences. If someone had a powerful emotional response during their visit, tears, joy, or peace, the priest would help them understand what this meant. If someone felt nothing, the priest would counsel patience and suggest practices that might help open them to divine presence. Dream incubation was a common practice at Enki's temple. Pilgrims would sleep in special chambers within the temple complex, hoping to receive divine guidance through dreams. The chambers were quiet and comfortable, designed to promote deep, restful sleep. Before sleeping, the pilgrim would state their question or concern clearly, asking Enki to provide guidance through a dream. Many pilgrims reported profound dream experiences in these chambers. They would dream of Enki appearing directly to them, offering advice or showing them visions. Others would have symbolic dreams that, with the priest's help, could be interpreted to reveal answers to their questions. Even those who did not dream, or who could not remember their dreams, often reported waking with unexpected clarity about their problems. The healing practices associated with Enki's temple combined physical and spiritual elements. Healers would examine patients carefully, noting symptoms and asking about the history of the illness. They would prescribe herbal remedies, dietary changes, and physical treatments like massage or bathing in therapeutic waters, but they would also address the spiritual dimension of illness, performing rituals to cleanse negative influences, asking Enki to bless the patient and teaching practices for maintaining spiritual health. Mental and emotional distress were taken seriously and treated with compassion. The Mesopotamians understood that suffering of the mind was as real as suffering of the body. They did not stigmatize those experiencing psychological difficulties, but recognized that such challenges were part of the human condition, affecting people regardless of their virtue or social status. Treatments for psychological distress included counseling, ritual purification, community support, and sometimes isolation or retreat for a period of rest and recovery. The underlying philosophy was that the person was not broken but temporarily out of balance, and the goal was to restore equilibrium through a combination of practical and spiritual interventions. Enki's wisdom in these matters was profound. He understood that humans were complex beings, that their well-being depended on multiple factors: physical health, emotional balance, social connections, sense of purpose, spiritual groundedness. Addressing only one aspect while neglecting others would not produce lasting healing. The whole person needed to be considered and treated. This holistic approach to health and well-being was one of Enki's great gifts to humanity. Modern medicine is only now rediscovering what the ancient healers knew: that mind and body are intimately connected, that social factors affect health outcomes, that meaning and purpose contribute to wellness, that healing involves more than just eliminating symptoms. The festivals celebrated at Enki's temple brought the entire community together in shared ritual and celebration. These were not solemn, joyless affairs, but occasions of genuine festivity: feasting, music, dancing, storytelling, communal prayer. The festivals served multiple purposes: honouring the god, reinforcing social bonds, marking the passage of time, and providing relief from the burdens of daily life. The New Year festival, mentioned earlier, was the most elaborate of all. It lasted for days, involving dramatic reenactments of the creation story, ritual combats symbolising the triumph of order over chaos, processions through the city, and the ritual renewal of the king's authority. During this festival, the social order was temporarily suspended. Slaves might eat with masters, women might take on roles usually reserved for men, ordinary people might speak to nobles as equals. This temporary suspension of normal rules served an important function. It reminded everyone that the social order, while necessary, was not natural or inevitable, but a human construction. It could be questioned, critiqued, and reformed. The hierarchy that governed daily life was useful but not sacred. In the presence of Enki, all humans were equally his children, equally deserving of respect and compassion. After the festival ended, normal life resumed, but people returned to their usual roles refreshed and renewed. They had been reminded of their fundamental equality, even as they accepted the practical necessities of social organisation. This balance between order and freedom, between hierarchy and equality, between structure and spontaneity, was central to Enki's vision of a healthy society. Music played a crucial role in worship and celebration. The Mesopotamians had a rich musical tradition, with a wide variety of instruments: lyres, harps, drums, flutes, and more. Music was understood to have power, to affect emotions, to connect heaven and earth, to make present what was absent. The right music, played skillfully and with devotion, could open doors to the divine realm. Certain melodies and rhythms were associated specifically with Enki. These were taught to musicians who trained at the temple, learning not just the technical skills of their instruments, but also the spiritual dimension of musical performance. To play for Enki was not mere entertainment, but sacred service, a form of prayer as valid as any verbal petition. The hymns sung in Enki's honour were poetic masterpieces, combining beautiful language with profound theology. They praised his wisdom, celebrated his creative power, recounted his mighty deeds, and expressed gratitude for his gifts. But they also included laments, questions, even gentle rebukes, when Enki seemed distant or when his purposes were unclear. This honest, unguarded communication with the divine was encouraged. Enki did not want empty flattery or mechanical recitation of prescribed formulas. He wanted genuine relationship, real dialogue, authentic expression of human experience, including doubts, fears, and frustrations. The relationship between god and worshipper was meant to be dynamic and alive, not static and dead. The scribal schools attached to Enki's temple were centres of learning that shaped Mesopotamian civilization. Young boys, and occasionally girls, though education was primarily for males, were sent to these schools to learn the complex art of cuneiform writing. The training was rigorous, taking years to complete, requiring memorization of hundreds of signs and their various meanings. But scribal education involved more than just writing. Students also studied mathematics, literature, history, law, and theology. They copied classic texts, learning not just their words but their deeper meanings, They composed their own works, developing skills in rhetoric and argumentation. They debated with each other and their teachers, sharpening their minds through intellectual combat. The best students were identified and given advanced training, preparing them for careers as high-level administrators, judges, or priests. These elite scribes wielded enormous influence, serving as advisors to kings, managing temple estates, recording legal decisions, and preserving knowledge for future generations. In a very real sense, they were the keepers of civilization, the human embodiments of Enki's gift of wisdom. The master scribes were deeply respected figures in Mesopotamian society. They were seen as wise men, counselors who could be consulted on difficult matters. Their opinions carried weight in debates about law, theology, ethics, and policy. They were intermediaries between the divine wisdom Enki had revealed and the practical needs of human society. Some of these master scribes composed their own works, adding to the body of wisdom literature. These texts addressed perennial, human concerns. How should one live? What is the good life? How can wisdom be cultivated? What obligations do we have to others? How should we respond to suffering and injustice? The answers they provided were deeply influenced by Enki's teachings, emphasizing the importance of knowledge, compassion, humility, and balance. One famous wisdom text, attributed to a master scribe named Shurupak, advised, "Do not pass judgment when you drink beer. Do not loosen the fetters of a criminal. Do not drive away a supplicant, and do not be angry with him. In your trouble seek a friend. Do not speak too freely, for speech can be reproached. Act expeditiously, and have done with it quickly. Do not vouch for anyone, for that person will hold you in contempt." These maxims were practical wisdom, distilled from long experience and careful observation of human behaviour. They reflected Enki's own approach, pragmatic, realistic, focused on what actually worked rather than on abstract ideals. Wisdom meant understanding human nature as it actually was, not as we might wish it to be, and making choices accordingly. Yet this pragmatism never descended into cynicism. Enki and his followers remained hopeful about human potential, even while acknowledging human limitations. Yes, people were imperfect, capable of selfishness and cruelty, but they were also capable of nobility, generosity, courage, and love. The goal was to cultivate the good while managing the bad, to create conditions that brought out the best in people, while minimizing opportunities for the worst. The legal codes attributed to divine inspiration, particularly Enki's influence, embodied this balanced approach. Punishments were severe enough to deter wrongdoing, but not so harsh as to be inhumane. Provisions were made for different circumstances and intentions. Accidental harm was treated differently than deliberate malice. The rights of the accused were protected through procedures requiring evidence and testimony. Most remarkably, these ancient codes included provisions to protect the vulnerable. Widows, orphans, the poor, foreigners. Those without power had recourse to law, could bring complaints against even the wealthy and powerful. Justice was not supposed to be a tool of the elite, but a protection for all members of society. This was a radical idea, one that would echo through history, shaping conceptions of law and justice in civilizations that succeeded Mesopotamia. The principle underlying these legal protections was simple but profound. All humans possess inherent dignity by virtue of being Enki's creations. They all carry within them the divine spark, the capacity for wisdom and goodness. Therefore, all deserve basic respect and fair treatment, regardless of their social status, wealth, or power. This principle was often violated in practice. Human societies being imperfect, the powerful did sometimes oppress the weak. The wealthy did exploit the poor, the strong did victimize the vulnerable. But the ideal remained, a constant challenge to the status quo, a reminder that things could and should be better. Prophetic voices would arise from time to time, calling society back to these fundamental principles. These prophets, sometimes priests, sometimes scribes, sometimes ordinary people seized by divine inspiration, would denounce injustice, call for reform, remind the powerful of their obligations. They invoked Enki's name and authority, claiming to speak on behalf of the god who loved justice and compassion. Not all of these prophetic voices were welcome. Kings and nobles who benefited from unjust systems did not appreciate being challenged. Some prophets were ignored, others were punished, a few were even killed for their messages. But their words were often preserved, recorded by sympathetic scribes, passed down through generations as testaments to the ongoing struggle for justice. This tension between the ideal and the real, between what should be and what is, was a constant theme in Mesopotamian thought. Enki himself embodied this tension. He had created humanity with divine potential, but that potential was realized only imperfectly, intermittently, partially. The gap between possibility and actuality was a source of both frustration and hope. Frustration because humans fell so far short of what they could be. Hope because they had not yet reached their limits, because growth and improvement remained possible. The slow evolution of Mesopotamian civilization over millennia demonstrated this gradual progress. Writing systems improved, becoming more efficient and expressive. Mathematical knowledge deepened, enabling more sophisticated calculations. Agricultural techniques advanced, producing better yields. Legal systems became more refined, protecting more people more effectively. Medicine progressed, saving more lives and reducing suffering. Each of these advances was built on foundations laid by previous generations. Knowledge accumulated, with each generation inheriting what came before and adding its own contributions. This was the power of writing, of preserved knowledge. It allowed human wisdom to grow across time, to benefit from the experiences and insights of countless individuals. Enki had foreseen this when he gave humanity the gift of writing. He understood that individual humans were limited, but humanity as a collective, as a tradition extending across generations, could achieve things no individual could accomplish alone. The civilization that emerged from Eridu and spread across Mesopotamia was not the work of any one person or generation, but the cumulative achievement of countless people working over millennia. This perspective, seeing humanity as a collective project extending across time, was itself a kind of wisdom. It meant that individual failure was not the end of the story. If one generation made mistakes, the next could learn from them and do better. If one city fell into decline, others could take up the torch of civilization. The work was never finished, the story never complete. Each generation had its role to play, its contribution to make, its part in the ongoing drama. Sleep comes gently now, carried on the current of these ancient stories, these timeless wisdoms. The words flow like water, like the eternal streams that pour from Enki's vase, never ceasing, always renewing, connecting all things in their flowing. Let consciousness drift on these waters. Let the mind float free of its moorings. Let the boundaries between self and story dissolve. In the darkness behind closed eyes, images may form. The great temple at Eridu, its walls gleaming in the morning sun, its gardens lush with life. Enki himself, bearded and kind, water flowing from his shoulders, fish swimming in the streams around him. The primordial Abzu, vast and deep and cool, source of all waters, foundation of all life. These images are gifts, ways of connecting with something older and deeper than our individual lives. They link us to our ancestors, who told these stories, who built these temples, who organized their lives around these truths. We are not the first to seek wisdom, to yearn for meaning, to hope for guidance. We stand in a long line of seekers stretching back to the dawn of civilization, and Enki stands with us still, not as an external deity demanding worship, but as a symbol of our highest aspirations. The wisdom we seek exists, not in some distant heaven, but in the accumulated experience of humanity, in the lessons learned and passed down, in the principles that have been tested and proven across generations. We access this wisdom when we open ourselves to learning, when we humble ourselves before complexity, when we choose compassion over cruelty, understanding over judgment. The God of wisdom asks nothing from us that we cannot freely give. He does not demand belief but invites exploration. He does not require obedience but encourages understanding. He does not threaten punishment but warns of natural consequences. The universe operates according to principles, patterns woven into the fabric of reality, and wisdom means understanding these patterns well enough to work with them rather than against them. Water flows downhill. This is not a law imposed from outside, but the nature of water itself. Fighting this reality leads to frustration and failure. Accepting it and working with it enables the creation of irrigation systems, fountains, water wheels, all the wonders of hydraulic engineering. So too with other aspects of reality. Understanding human nature, social dynamics, ecological systems, all of this enables us to live better, to create societies that work, to build civilizations that endure. This is Enki's final lesson, the deepest wisdom he offers. Pay attention to reality as it is, not as you wish it were. Learn how things actually work. Study the patterns, understand the principles, then work with these realities, shaping them skillfully toward good ends. This is not resignation, but the foundation of effective action. Only by accepting what is can we hope to create what should be. The night grows deeper still. Breathing slows, muscles relax completely. The busy thoughts of the day fade into silence. The consciousness that moments ago was reading these words now drifts toward dream, toward the realm where Enki still speaks to those who will listen, where ancient wisdom mingles with personal insight, where the eternal and the immediate merge.